Hello and welcome back to the NAS Metal production channel here at YouTube. Welcome to another album of the week. This, of course, is episode number 52. So, for this week's album pick, in celebration for its anniversary, which of course had turned 50 on February the 13th, which of course was this past Thursday, it's of course is the debut full-length album from Black Sabbath. Goddamn, 50 years at this point, 50 years. This is the album that not just kicked off Black Sabbath's career, but also, to many, to even historians of at least the genre, gave birth to the whole heavy metal genre. I know some will argue with that, with at least stuff that might have came before it and might say whatever. However, when I went back to listen to this album at least a couple of days ago, I really have to say, I don't think there was ever any other album that was nearly this heavy, this electric, this, I guess I want to say, it might be very corny, but this rockin' and just completely balls out assault. None of it had ever come close. Like any album that came before it never came close to nearly being this ruckus and almost chaotic at times. I mean, for 1970, these days there's been a lot more albums that you can say are much more chaotic, more lethal, and more extreme. But for 1970, this was fucking extreme. You couldn't at this point. It just seemed like nothing could ever hold a candle to such an album like this. I mean, this came out on February 13th, a day before Valentine's Day. And I mean, for anybody that probably purchased this album on Valentine's Day, and probably was putting this on while probably celebrating it, was probably so much taken back that it almost, if you're a Christian family, it almost definitely seemed like you really invited the devil himself to probably hang out with you on Valentine's Day and probably drink a couple of wine bottles. Because this shit, for this timeline, was definitely fucking just fucking vicious. But enough of that. Let's definitely get into what probably makes this album so iconic and why this is always held in such high regard. So let's definitely, of course, start with the very first song on this album. That, of course, being the seminal title track. The song that basically everyone says that the first time they put this on, it was like the most heaviest, most brooding, most darkest song they had ever heard. And then still this day, some will say, is still the most darkest, most heaviest, and most brooding song there is. I mean, of course, you can't get any more iconic when you start the song off with, of course, with a sound clip of sounds of rain, just heavy rain, and then of course the sound of crackling thunder before going into those seminal, those evil dark notes of the song Black Sabbath. I mean, was it for those first 3 or 2 minutes? It's just a slow, heavy, dark, and sinister track that for a lot of people, this was like a horror movie put on to an album. I mean, of course, you had those those Disney soundtracks or so that was used for haunted houses and Halloween. But this is like, in a way, almost equivalent of a horror movie. This is the first time where it almost sounded like it might have been the most evil fucking track for 1970. But the thing is, though, there's more to this song than just those first 3 minutes. It definitely ends up picking up in a way for really just surprising. Again, just re-listen to it. It's just something how when just the song just picks up, I almost again, I just have to be kind of blown how in a way, almost kind of speed or fast at the parts. So it's almost like kind of galloping in a way. Almost seems like you can see this as kind of predating a little bit of Iron Maiden. And of course, it probably isn't no secret that I think guys like Steve Harris definitely held this album a little high regard. I mean, Geezer Butler was again, just as more of a dominant bass player, and it's definitely someone with a very tone and style that you almost can see was definitely a influential inspiration to a guy like Steve Harrison. I will definitely get into some of those points here, but it's just the way it just gallops on. It's just freaking great. And of course, a lot of Tony Iommi's kind of guitar tricks and solos. He definitely had a very metallic feel to it. And definitely for sure was very just very metal, I guess you could say, for 1970. I know a lot of people will say that Judas Priest definitely melded and definitely really, I guess you could say redefined, but for surely kind of perfected what Black Sabbath was definitely birthing here. But there's still a lot of really early metallic moments, and in ways was almost different, and definitely was kind of moved a little bit from what you might kind of getting in, at least in the 60s. But it still has a very almost 60s feel. It's just that the guitars, the whole tone and everything, the whole gain and overdrive was turned up. Everything is just turned up to 11 here. But yeah, just an iconic track. Of course, track number 2, The Wizard, which is again one of my, for me, it's definitely a personal favorite of mine. Of course, come on. What a way to kind of open the song up. I mean, it opens a very dramatic, almost, and definitely, yeah, very, very dramatic and almost grandiose. Because, I mean, it's the instrument is harmonica, but it's just the way it's just played and the way it's just sustained on some of those notes and the way the notes are just being played here. It just has a very dramatic feel before going into a very, just again, very almost at times you might think is going to might now turn into some sort of heavy, almost hard rock bluesy track before again going and then quickly switching in to definitely just one of the heaviest jam as well. I mean, it's not nearly as dark and brooding as the song Black Sabbath, but it's still a very heavy rocker. So The Wizard is just one of my personal favorites on this album. Now, of course, track number 3. I mean, Wasp, here, of course, I'm basing my stuff off the U.S. pressing or American pressing to some people, but I'll definitely later on get into the difference between this and the European pressing. But here, it's just titled here, Wasp, Behind the Wall of Sleep, which is definitely another sort of great track. I mean, it starts very, very eccentric and very energetic before definitely going to another slow, bluesy, heavy track as well. And of course, for a little while, it also kind of switches gear to I think it's titled Basically, which is basically just I know no pun intended. Geezer Butler just goofing around on his bass guitar a bit, and it seems like for a little while he's kind of hooked up what to me really seems to be some sort of maybe phaser pedal or effect. Because it just has that kind of feel, that effect going on, that sort of sound and tone. While he's just goofing around a bit, playing around on his bass. But of course, going in those instant, recognizable bass notes that, of course, will end up going straight into, again, definitely easily, again, one of Black Sabbath's most I guess fan favorites, one of the most biggest songs for the time. I mean, this song is nothing more than a fan favorite. That's of course I'm talking about NIB. I mean, it's ever since this album. There's probably not once since there has been a Black Sabbath concert that probably has never added the song NIB to the set list. No matter who was singing at the time, whether it would be Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan. Maybe for a little while there, Glenn Hughes or Tony Martin. I don't think there's ever been a Black Sabbath. I'm also kind of forgetting about Ray Gillan there for a little while, but still, no matter what, any of those Black Sabbath concerts with any of those singers, has NIB ever been at least not been on the set list. It's like almost like again, it's like Judas Priest not adding in either Living After Midnight or You've Got Another Thing Coming. It's like it's just that iconic of a track, and it's definitely one that definitely in a way kind of really in a just again set Black Sabbath and career in stone almost. It's just that one song, just very iconic. So NIB, that's the last part of at least this one long 4-part track that is of course number 3 here. Now this is where I'll start going into the difference between the European and U.S. pressings. On the European pressings, that the song that kicks off the second side is a song called "Evil Woman." Don't Play Your Games with Me, which of course was actually a cover track, and of course I'll get to. There's another cover song here, but still, this was a cover track. Very good song though. I'm not always familiar with the song. I mean, it's a song I do know of quite a well, but it's just it seemed like I've just never really been very familiar with the European pressing of this album, so it's not always familiar with me. But it's definitely a decent sort of cover too. Definitely something you won't hear a whole lot from Black Sabbath with like covering songs. After this, I think it'd be like the only time it really covered or at least added any covers to an album. I may be wrong. Someone might come in here and correct me, but still, it's just something that's not very usual now, ever since the sound to not have to add in a cover track. But the Evil Woman, Don't Play Your Games with Me is only on the European pressing. But here on the US pressing, it's replaced with a song called Wicked World, which is a song I am very much familiar with. I mean, the way it just starts off with Bill Ward kind of doing those swing beats on the hi-hat and stuff. It's just very swinging. And of course, Tony Iommi, of course, coming up with those real sort of almost fast guitar licks that is, again, very bluesy and very typical, though, of what you were kind of getting in the 60s. But then, of course, goes into quickly switches a little bit of the pacing and definitely goes into a more slower, almost at times very mid-paced, heavy track. I mean, this is also the first time I actually can hear Tony Iommi kind of using those fast palm mutes almost at times, which is very something that would be more synonymous with a lot of the heavy metal bands after this. But this was definitely something that was very unique. I mean, it's got its slow points here and there. It definitely slows down. Very almost proggy. I mean, this album might be the proggiest though at times of the Black Sabbath albums. But I mean, of course, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and Sabotage. I mean, Technical Ecstasy. But this one really does kind of flirt with a little almost psychedelia and prog-like. And this one definitely, the song Wicked World for sure has that. Now, of course, the very last song, which definitely might be the most deepest cut of this album for sure. That's, of course, here on the US pressing. It's titled here, A Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and, of course, Warning. Now, Warning, of course, being the second cover track on here. It's actually a cover of Ansley Dunbar, Retaliation, which, again, was Ansley Dunbar, other band. Of course, I'm familiar with his work with Journey and Whitesnake. Anyways, that's the second cover on this album, that's for sure. And, of course, here on the U.S. pressing, it's the only cover. But on the European pressing, it's the second cover for the album. But, again, this whole track, though, is a fucking heavy jam, too. I mean, it starts off very somber, very almost, very bleak as well, with a very acoustic sounding, playing those notes. And of course, I forget what instrument is kind of playing back there, but I think it's an instrument that I actually seen Metal Theologian play on one of his, Response to Captain Howdy. It was like, pick an instrument basically to cover a track. I forgot what it is, but that's the kind of instrument that is being played on this track. You kind of hear it in the background. It's making those weird noises and stuff, but it almost has the way it almost gives though a slight swampy feel, almost Vietnam-like. Because for some reason, every time I do hear those little parts, I end up actually thinking of something like Apocalypse Now. Some of the moments in that film and the scenery and the atmosphere kind of gives that. But of course, immediately there, it switches gear to a sort of, again, almost very melodic, almost a slight sort of very moody kind of very rocker, but of course it eventually ends up going. It just paces and just it gets as more it goes on, it definitely switches into a very just more jamming heavy track. So all in all, these 5 songs are on the European Wrestling 7 songs or 8 songs, depending if you get some of the at least the some of the special edition CD copies that came out within the 90s or so that re-added an Evil Woman. This is a classic album. I really don't have to say much more. This was a classic album for Black Sabbath. This album really just kicked off everything for the band. Again, also being seen as the album that birthed the heavy metal genre, and even in ways to doom metal genre, especially with those first 3 minutes of a song, Black Sabbath. I mean, shit, everything was just birthed from this album. It just really it started the whole thing. So with that. And of course, in celebration of this album, I hope you all are definitely rebusting this album out to revisit it, or at least to give it one more listen, or even just even if you are just listening to it all the time. I mean, come on, I can't see anybody who is right now getting into the heavy metal or at least hard rock genre, anyone not liking this album. Every bit of this is everything that it is, or what is led to believe. It's just a great fucking album. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. Definitely give me your thoughts on this album anyways. I mean, if you have any memories of this album or what are your thoughts, you can definitely I'll basically type that in the comment section below. So with that, I hope you all enjoyed. This is Every Thrash Head Sam out. I'll see you all later, and take care, and I hope you all even had enjoyed your Valentine's Day.